And let's now bring you the conversation on the off-cycle election happening in Kogi State. My guest is Princess Hamman-Obels, who is director of the Electoral Hub. Good morning. Glad to have you join me, Princess.
Good morning. I'm happy to be here. Thank you for having me.
Fantastic. Now, what do you think the roles are of observers in this election? What really is your role during observation of the election happening?
Observers add values to elections generally. They help to bring legitimacy to elections. They help to bring credibility to elections by the role and the work they do. So there are different kinds of observers. You have those that observe elections on election day or just around the election, the voting day itself. While you have those that do monitor the whole process, so around the cycle, the 4-year cycle of elections. And for those, mostly for around the election days, what observers do is to record, as they do in monitoring the process as well, they record what they observe in the field in terms of like on election day, time opening of polls, closing of polls, behavior of INEC ad hoc staff, behavior of security, and basically everything around the election in terms of providing providing recommendations on how to improve elections after recording all of observations on elections. Observers also during elections note things that need immediate interventions. So interventions by security agents for where it's security issues. So observers reach out to the security agencies.
Okay, talking about right now, Mrs. Obels, talking about observers in this election. What skills or training are needed to ensure they impact citizens' engagement in an election as this?
They need to have skills of, observation skills, basically. So they need to know how to be neutral. So no matter what, observation requires no partisanship. So you need to be neutral. So one of the things you need to do is to train your skills of then how to record and report appropriately. For instance, something happening in one polling unit, you can't use that to generalize across the elections. You should be able to report that polling unit A has this specific problem. And also because one problem happens in polling unit A, you then say, oh, this problem was a problem of the election. So observers need to have those kind of skills to know how to report properly and give evidence-based reporting. So you have to be able to cite exactly what happened and where it happened. And observers also need to be able to engage local communities. So one thing observers group do is to actually employ people living in the communities as part of the observation groups. So you cannot have an observer come from Abuja and bring everybody from Abuja, for instance, to observe in Imo. Usually, people that will observe Imo election will be Imo-lites. So local community will be recruited to be part of the observation groups, and they will be properly trained in terms of how to observe elections. So that's our observer missions, observer groups.
Let's just take a minute to talk about synergy. You are the director of an electoral hub. I'm looking at how does an observer organization like yours align with the objective of INEC, for instance, align with the objective of security agencies, for instance, in ensuring a hitch-free, peaceful, free and fair election?
So let me correct an impression. Technically, the electoral hub is not an observation organization, but I'm more of an electoral governance organization. So we're interested in the whole full electoral process across the cycle. And what we're interested in mostly is to do research, is to do documentation, and use this in terms of advocacy for better electoral policies, better electoral law. So for reform, basically. So that's what we do. So we're not so particular about observing voting, but basically, we're very particular about the whole complexities around elections. So the whole everything that happened across an electoral cycle, that's what we're concerned about. How do we build synergy? We work closely with INEC. We work closely with other groups, other civil society working in this space. We also we basically work closely with all stakeholders involved in the electoral process. So not just INEC, but all the other MDAs as well, because you know that beyond INEC, you have other ministry agencies and departments of government also involved in elections. So we work with everybody, including the National Assembly, who makes the laws. And of course, we also engage with the judiciary. As you can see, elections in Nigeria, it's not just the voters that determine outcomes. Our judiciary play a major role in determining outcomes. So judiciary is also one of the stakeholders of elections.
Finally, Princess, if I may, I beg your pardon, just one last question for you. Finally, what do you think could be the challenges or shortfalls of observers monitoring the election? And how can we, guard against these challenges in ensuring a smooth election?
One of the major challenges, I will use this particular 11/11 election, so the ones happening this Saturday, as a reference point, is insecurity. Right now, there are a lot of things happening in Imo, in Bayelsa, and in Kogi State, in terms of that pointing to the elections may possibly go. And one of the main challenges and worries is actually the challenges of being attacked, on election days. And we are particularly very worried about violence against women in particular in the context of elections. As you know, this means when there's so much violence is a threat that also exacerbates a voter's apathy. When the fear of violence means people won't come out to vote, particularly women and particularly people living with disabilities. So these are the real worries about elections, particularly these elections coming up on November 11th.
All right, thank you so much for your contribution on the news. Thank you so much, Princess Hamman-Obels, Director, Electoral Hub. Thank you for your insight.
Thank you, and it's good to have you to be on your program.